of the two Colarusso applications. We're reviewing our fee parts 1, 2, and 3 at this point. We've completed part 2. I know we wanted to do a little bit of review of that tonight together to make sure that we were all on point, and then clean up anything that we need to clean up, and then moving on to get guidance from Ryan on how we should proceed for part 3. So, any comments before we get started?
Betsy, can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I wanted to just not take too long here, but the planning board has received 2 letters from Mr. Privatera in recent months, and I think it's important to speak to these before we dive into work tonight. So here's what I want to go through. Basically, the first letter from February 8th and the second was on April 30th, are both posted on the city website. Frankly, there are too many distortions in these letters to go through each and every point. And I don't think that that's purposes tonight, but there are sort of 2 things that I want to address that I think we should establish for the record and for the purposes of our work this evening. Now, the first is I just want to call attention to a tactic that Mr. Privatera seems to be using to try and frame our secret review process and our overall review of this application as being somehow mismanaged. And this tactic is at play in both letters, but to illustrate, I would just highlight what is essentially a straw man argument that he's making in the April 30th letter, where from where I sit, he's intentionally misrepresenting the board's request during our last meeting to determine the average daily trips to the dock during the time that Local Law 5 was passed in 2011. So just as a reminder, it's our understanding that section 325.17.1 of the zoning law limits continued dock operations to those that existed as of December 22nd, 2011, the effective date of Local Law 5. And what we're interested in and what we asked for are the average daily trips to and from the dock at that time, not just on one day, as Mr. Privatera claims in his letter. Now, I think Mr. Privatera is well aware that we aren't asking for trip information on only one day in 2011, but instead, he's hoping to create a false record of our board mismanaging this review. And unfortunately, that's really just the latest tactic or example of this tactic at work. Given the amount of time that this board is willing to dedicate to this application, we're now holding our second standalone meeting to ensure that we can move through this review as quickly as possible for the applicant's sake. I find it disturbing to have to deal with these attempts to frame our review in a dishonest way. Now, the second point is just to once again establish the basic facts underlying this review, which are all called into question in these 2 letters, so that we all have complete clarity before we start our work tonight. And for this, I want to share some of the salient points from a letter we received from Ken Dow recently on February 18th, which is also posted on the city website. And for those who aren't familiar, Mr. Dow successfully defended the city of Hudson against Mr. Privatera and the applicant's lawsuit, claiming that we didn't have the right to conduct a secret review for this application. So what I want to share here on the record is Mr. Dow's shock at reading Mr. Privatera's February 8th letter, and to again just establish the scope of this review. So now quoting from the letter, "I've had a look at Mr. Privatera's letter of February 8th. I was stunned. It is 10 pages of shockingly dishonest misrepresentations of matters that have been addressed over and over, and which are the subject of final and definitive court rulings that are the exact opposite of what Mr. Privatera claims. These points have been definitively settled. His latest letter is so brazenly dishonest that I am seriously considering filing a professional complaint. His continual and persistent misrepresentations cannot be allowed to go on." And now, just to skip ahead to the core things for the purposes of our review, Mr. Dow lays out the following. As of 2011, commercial dock operations could continue as a non-conforming use. The right to operate as a non-conforming use was terminated when Colarusso did the triggering act of working on the bulkhead. Now that the right to operate as a non-conforming use has been terminated by the triggering act, they need to get a special use permit for the entire operation in order to continue to operate. And finally, the court said that seeker review for continued commercial dock operations is necessary. So to wrap this up, I just want to say, let's not let there be any confusion about these points moving forward. I think everyone on this board is committed to doing a thorough and fair seeker review, and that's what we're here to continue tonight.
Thank you, Steve. Very, very articulate. I appreciate it. Any other comments, board members?
Well, I want to reemphasize some of the things that Steve pointed out, which I'm honored to be on a board with board members who are as thoughtful and as articulate as my colleagues on this board. And I do want to thank Steve for eloquently recapping what has been one of my concerns, because I think it needs to be very, very clear that the review that we are undertaking has virtually nothing to do with bulkhead repair or erosion control or any of the acts which actually have triggered this review. Having committed those acts, we are simply following what 325.17.1 requires us to do, which is to conduct a seeker review of commercial dock operations in their entirety. And once we grant, if we get there, once we grant the applicant a permit to operate on the work, then they have a right to use the property. And we're trying our best to be as careful and as considerate as we can as we conduct that review. But, I went back and I read part 1, and the basic description of this project from the very beginning is erroneous. It is not about a bulkhead. It's not about erosion control. It's about a review of the commercial dock operations in their entirety. This does not constitute a second seeker review. Judge Melkonian was incredibly clear about that. And I think that we need to be really rigorous about the parameters and the terms under which we're proceeding, because there's been a lot of, I think frankly, some confusion on the part of the public. I think some of that confusion may have been encouraged by counsel to the applicant, but our job, I think, is to be as rigorous and as clear as we can as we go through this stuff. And, I really do appreciate Steve's commentary. I just want to reemphasize that our review is not about the bulkhead, and it is about the commercial dock operations in their entirety.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to thank Steve and Larry for highlighting all those very key items. And I've got no further contribution except that clearly we have a path forward, and clarifying those items really, I think, should help us and anyone else listening in on our path forward, and not to be misled, I believe, by some of the comments and assertions made by counsel for the applicant. And I'm looking forward to proceeding.
Okay. So Larry, you bring up part 1 and the fact that there's misstatements right there from the very beginning. So shall we take a moment to clear that up?
Sure.
Did you have suggested wording that you would?
Maybe we can do a screen share with.
I think we're planning on going through the part 1. So why don't we bring it up and just do it from the beginning?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Can I chime in with a question, and perhaps this is for our counsel? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that it's the applicant's job to officially submit part 1 accurately, and we are flagging issues, and my best take on it is falsehoods that are there. So I think we need clarity on, perhaps from Victoria, on we're making comments that clearly the applicant, I think, should respond to.
Right. Generally, the board would make comments on part 1, and the applicant would have to fix or correct the part 1 and resubmit it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So board, is that where you want to start tonight? Shall we just take it from the top, start with part
Yeah.
one? So Ryan, would you be our screen share guy?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
All right. So this is the part one form most recently submitted by the applicant in December 2019. But this is the one that I've shared with the board, and I believe maybe on the city's website as well, with some markups as we've gone through the part two of corrections needing to be made. If there's members that want to lead the discussion, if there's specific areas we want to look at, otherwise I could perhaps just go through and we could discuss page by page and just make sure everybody's on in agreement moving forward. I'm seeing a shaking head.
I think that's
So-
right. Yeah, if you want to lead us through, I'm sure the board will feel free to jump in whenever they need to.
Is there a way to make
Okay,
it?
so
Sorry, Victoria?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just asking if there's a way to make it not red because it's hard for me to distinguish.
let me
If not,
Bigger
that's
would be great too.
there we go.
Okay,
How's
great.
this? Okay. So part A here, just dealing with some very basic project and project information, address, name of project. The description of the proposed action includes, as stated here, retroactive approval of the bulkhead and just the bulkhead and conditional use approval of the planning board.
I think that what we've determined is that this needs to be rewritten to say that that this is an application for continued dock operations and taking into account the dock operations happening here. I don't have good words.
I think
I mean,
B covers it to some extent, but maybe it should say B and then comma, including the replacement of the bulkhead, because that's a small portion of it. But the main part is the conditional use permit for the,
yeah,
commercial.
that should be A. And I think we can simply eliminate the existing A and use it as a parenthetical clause in item B, because it really is not, we can say triggered by the replacement of a 75-foot high concrete thing, but it's irrelevant. I also think that the storage of Hudson River buoys is also a red herring, right? We've never, in my time on the board, which is now nearing 18 months, we've never discussed buoys stored by the Coast Guard. The issue in front of us is that we need to evaluate and review an application for a continued use permit.
Conditional use permit.
Conditions permit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think the simpler the better. I mean, I think that it's a conditional use permit for continued commercial dock operations.
Yeah.
Full stop. I think everything else is unnecessary.
it should say conditional use permit approval. There you go.
By the City of Hudson Planning Board for continued.
Even shipment of aggregate and asphalt millings because you are looking into, the barges and the deep water. And I mean, those are impacts that you've discussed.
But I like Stephen's point. Like we could just say continued use of commercial dock operations. Full stop, period. That covers everything. And we have an errand article.
So what
on
I'm
there.
going to
You don't even need continued use of, just commercial dock operations.
No, that's the term in the code. I think that's why it was there.
Okay.
But I think we should discuss a bit here, and this is something that I think will go through this whole discussion, is I believe this board has made the determination that we are considering this a new application. And I know that there's continued use in the code, but that continued use is predicated on getting a conditional use permit. So there's use now that per Melconian has disappeared. And I feel like that continued use is used inaccurately and sometimes used to confuse matters. In that per Melconian, the use has gone away, and the applicant is in front of us applying for a conditional use permit for dock operations.
Madam Chairman, may I just bring back one point, please? And thank you for calling me dishonest for citing the law and representing my client. We are here before this board. We've been before you for 4 years because we received an order to remedy. The remedy said to go before the board and get approval for the bulkhead work that we did. That's why Part 1 says that. Melconian says go back and get additional conditions based on that repair. That's what the last line of his decision says, and that's what the law says. So our application is based on the order to remedy, and that's what we did. I can't explain how the board is comparing the existing operations to an imaginary green field, which has never been done before under seeker in the history of the state, best we can tell. But we are here to conform to the order to remedy, and we have. We are not here for the entire revisitation of the entire commercial dock operation. We are here for approval of the improvement.
That's incorrect.
Mr. Privataro, I think we went over this at the last meeting. The permit you're seeking is for the continued use of the dock. It's continuation of existing commercial dock operations. So it's the whole enchilada. But back to Clark's point, the term in the code is continued use. And so, you know, I don't have a problem with keeping those words in.
It's
Well, get rid of use of.
Go ahead.
So we have the language for us from the judge. And I think, you know, rather than disputing this thing internally, we can simply follow what the judge told us to do. And it says it right here. It's on page 8, final and amended decision in order from page 8. Section D, triggering the termination of petitioner's right to continue to operate the commercial dock. This is the critical thing. Without conditional use permit, and that seeker review for continued commercial dock operations is necessary, period, end of quote. So I'm totally fine to use that, right? Conditional use permit for continued commercial dock operations. That's what Judge Melconian described it as. I'm totally fine to describe it like the judge did. He told us what to do. We should follow him. And
yes, and the judge said to continued use, meaning that you should be comparing it to existing operations, not an imaginary greenfield. So that's what you should be doing.
Betsy, can I just
We're
chime
just
in
looking
here?
at part 1 at this point.
Betsy,
So
can I chime in? I feel like we're having an internal deliberation here, and
I was just going to say, you know, I'm happy to, we need to move along. This is our workshop to move this along. This is the board's review. This is our form. This is our working form, I believe. Victoria, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that these are for the planning board to use during our deliberations for seeker. So we will continue on. Thank you, Larry, for clearing up what Judge Melconian said. I really appreciate that. And I think we've come to, I think we've parsed this enough myself. I think we can move on.
yeah,
All right. Any questions or concerns with any of the contact information?
No, no, we can move forward.
Okay, so government approvals. The current iteration of the form identifies site plan and conditional use permit by the City of Hudson, the Columbia County Planning Board 239M review, as well as DEC Docks, Moorings, Platforms permit, DOS Coastal Consistency review, and Army Corps nationwide permit. Now, a number of those actually those state and federal permits listed and the data receipt provided here were specifically for the triggering event and not the continued dock operation. So I'll just note that.
So Victoria, do we need to renotice DEC, DOS, Army Corps?
No, they've already submitted their comments. We sent this around a few months ago to everyone. And so, you know, we received their comments back, and there's been no project change that would require recirculation at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Let's look at that again in a few minutes, because I'm not so sure about that.
Okay. So put a pin in it, Larry. Okay.
Okay. Coastal resources, the site is within a designated inland waterway. Community with a local waterfront revitalization program. This is selected no.
And why is that? Because it has, we do, whether it's been approved by DOS may be a different story, but we do have a community.
Well, I think
it's
sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that word approved, I think, relates to funding, not to the approval of the local regulations.
So shouldn't that be yes, John?
I would think it should, yeah.
Can I make a comment? Actually, Betsy, this is just in the code, and I know we haven't discussed this, but this might be a good time to do it. 325-35-2 says consistency review with local waterfront revitalization program. Now, the caveat here is that Hudson, as I understand it, never put together a coastal consistency review board. But the code clearly states, and I'll read it here if you bear with me for a second. Whenever a proposed action is located within the city's coastal area, each city agency shall, prior to approving funding or undertaking an action, make a determination that is consistent with the LWRP policy standards summarized in subsection B8 herein. No action in the coastal area shall be approved, funded, or undertaken by that agency without such a determination. It does not say that this would go away if the board was never created. So again, I'm not sure if this is the right time to discuss this, but clearly there's a language in the code that says the agency, the planning board, would need to make a determination whether it's consistent with the LWRP policies.
That was my interpretation of that too as well.
Right.
Yep. The other agency that is technically missing there, I think, is HCDPA, which is the flood permit.
Can I just ask, how has the planning board been handling LWRP reviews on projects?
We haven't had one in this area before. Well, I take that back. We had kitties, but it wasn't, so it was in the LWRP area. It's a good question.
Okay, we'll follow up.
Yep.
That's a good question.
Okay, so we added the HCDPA floodplain development permit under city approvals, local approvals, and revised to select yes for an LWRP. We confirmed with the DEC that the area is not within a coastal erosion hazard area as that term is defined by DEC.
Right. Okay.
Okay, moving on to section C, planning and zoning. First question is in regard to whether this is just related to adoption of a local planning or zoning action. So the selection for that is no, and then we move into adopted land use plan.
Back up first. Sorry, Ryan.
Yep.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, go on.
Okay. So C2A, do any municipally adopted city, town, village, or county comprehensive land use plans include the site where the proposed action would be located? Yes. If yes, does the comprehensive plan include specific recommendations for the site where the proposed action would be located? Again, yes. B, is the site of the proposed action within any local or regional special planning districts, for example, Greenway, BOA, designated state or federal heritage area, watershed management plan, or other? Yes. If yes, identify the plans. The city's LWRP, the Hudson River Valley Natural Heritage Area, and the Greenway, as well as the estuary, are identified. Are there any others needing to be identified?
I'm just checking one thing, Ryan, because I'm not sure it belongs there. Sorry. What? You guys can move on. I will find this. I'm so sorry. Oh, no, why don't we move on? I will find it. I'm so sorry. It's okay.
Okay. C, is the proposed action located wholly or partially within an area listed in an adopted municipal open space plan or an adopted municipal farmland protection plan? This is selected as no. All right, moving on to C3, zoning. Is the site of proposed action located in a municipality with an adopted zoning law or ordinance? Yes. If yes, what zoning classification? Core riverfront, the city's core riverfront zone. Is the use permitted or allowed by a special or conditional use permit? And this has been selected yes. Item C, is a zoning change requested as part of the proposed action? Selection is no. Moving on to C4, in what school district? Hudson City School District. What police? B, police or other protective forces. City of Hudson Police, county sheriffs, and state police are identified. Regarding fire protection, EMS, City of Hudson Fire Department, and Columbia Memorial Hospital. What parks serve the project site? Ricks Point is identified.
Should that not include the entire Riverfront Park? Of which Ricks Point is merely a part?
Yes.
And the formal name is Henry Hudson Riverfront Park?
Henry Hudson Waterfront Park, yeah.
Henry Hudson Waterfront Park.
Okay. D1 project, or
Before you go further, just one other thing
Yep.
for the emergency services. You might want to include Greenport Rescue Service.
and as we go through this, part one is meant to be kind of broad. So if there's any, if you're on the line about anything, it doesn't hurt to include it. It in no way changes what the board can, do and review in part 2 and 3. So we want to be all inclusive here where possible. So moving on to section D of the EAF, D1A, what is the general nature of the proposed action? It's identified as industrial or / commercial. Total acreage of the proposed action, 12.346 acres, and that represents the most recent not subdivision map, but the plat filed as part of the project record. So that's the northerly end of the riverfront parcel that Colarusso owns. There is an additional southerly tract that abuts that is a separate parcel on this property maps that have been submitted.
So on this one, sorry, Ryan, on D1B, I think that this is a residual error from the erroneous project description, which we corrected at the start of our discussion. Because again, going back to the Melconian decision, conditional use permit, seeker review for continued commercial dock operations is necessary. The court also wrote, quote, to the extent petitioners contend that respondents' determination that seeker review is necessary for continued dock operations constitutes an unlawful second seeker review, the court rejects such a contention. If we take Melconian's decision and we follow Bill Sharp's amazing commentary from 2011, I would encourage all of my colleagues on the board to re-listen to Bill Sharp's 5 minutes on this matter repeatedly. We must be looking now at the entirety of the property, not the bulkhead, not the erosion component, not the dock component, but the entirety of the operations as they exist in the city of Hudson. And so that means at least we need to be looking at the acreage of the site of the proposed action as the 115.4 acres. And that number, I believe, needs to carry forward through the other 2 lines in part D of D.1. And the last point that I want to make is that we have an amazing citizenry in Hudson. And I got an email yesterday identifying that the 115.4 acres is actually a miscalculation. It should be 117, but I'll leave that to the applicant to figure out exactly what the total acreage affected is. But I think this answer is, first of all, a residual error from the part description. We need to change this one. And then I think that if the interested and involved agencies who were reviewing this project did it on the basis of the 0.00344 physically disturbed acres, that review that they did cannot possibly be a valid review. We've got to go back to them and let them know that, in fact, what we're doing here is evaluating a conditional use permit for the entire operations that incorporates the entire 115 acres. And I think
so Larry, so the 115 acres, I want to make sure we're all clear on this. Hall Road is a separate use, for which a separate permit has been issued, right? The code breaks it out as a separate use. Yes. If you look at the zoning law, the code breaks out the Hall Road as a separate use from the dock. So
our code defines commercial dock operations as inclusive of egress and ingress, including any private roads accessing the property. We have to review the operations. We're told by the judge we have to review commercial dock operations, and our code defines that.
The conditional uses: 1, continuation of existing commercial dock; 2, private causeway or private
operations
that provides ingress or egress to the property upon which a commercial dock is conducted. So that's a separate use.
I just listened to what Bill Sharp, the attorney who drafted the damn thing, told us to do. And he said, if anything happens, if anything's triggered, we have to review the entire operations. And an example that he used on the entire operations was actually a paving of the road. It's in the language. And the time the zoning change was enacted in 2011, the dock operations would be non-conforming. They could continue without modifications as a non-conforming use at any time at which any change, improvement, repair, or alteration was made on the parcel. The owner operator would be required to obtain a special use permit for the entire property.
I understand what you're saying. And so this is where it gets difficult. If you're just considering roads as they exist now as part of the operation, fine. But to the extent you're considering the changes to the Hall Road, that's separate.
I completely agree with you.
And a separate secret.
I completely agree with you. And the way that I try to understand this is by thinking of it. I have a little thought experiment. So imagine the triggering event happened. The bulkhead repair happened. and there was no plan to widen the roadway, move the roadway bed, and pave the roadway. They just had the triggering event. We would be doing seeker on the entire dock operations, which is the component on the waterfront in, west of the gates, the city streets that they travel on, and the private causeway. That's the operations. And assuming that we approve that operation, which could very well happen, coming up upon us, then they could say, hey, you know what, for this to really work for me, I need to make the road 2 ways. I need a stronger bed that reduces runoff. I want to pave it. And then now, right, Greenport did the seeker on that. So seeker's done on that. We don't have to worry about that or think about that. And the strange thing about this review is that those 2 things are happening simultaneously.
So
But if we imagine them,
I was gonna say, might I suggest that we ask them to put an asterisk here, just saying, because saying something like includes roads as existing, but proposed improvements to roads are part of separate application and review or something.
I am totally fine with that. I'm totally fine with that.
I want to be clear about, what we're all reviewing. And then as far as total acreage to be physically disturbed, again, this question is not about necessarily what's happening at the site. It's about what are the acres that are going to be changed as a result of your approval. And so I understand why they only included the dock, the bulkhead repairs. So this may be another place where we ask them to do an explanation or an asterisk that says 0.00344, for dock repairs, comma, however, whole 12.4 acre site will continue to be used. Something like that. Because, this question really usually is getting to what's going to change from what is on the ground now. And of course, they already did.
And what's going to change, what's going to change is that the termination of petitioner's right to continue, which has happened, right? Melconian said it. Termination of petitioner's right to continue has happened. The change would be that we gave it a conditional use permit. That's the change. And the change affects 115 or 117 acres. And so the bizarre thing is that the seeker questions are not made for operations, right? They're not. They're made for a parcel where you want to put a shopping center in a parking lot or whatever the hell they're made for, right? So I think that in interest of clarity, we have to simply say that the impacted area is the 115 acres. That's what we're reviewing. And it's triggered by the smaller component. We can be very transparent about it. I think we should be. But the actual acreage is the entire.
I think with the clarification, I'm comfortable. And then to address your third issue, I still don't think that this needs to be recirculated to the other agencies. The site plan and our resolution that the board sent around was clear that we were looking at the continued dock operation. So I'm not sure what we get from sending it to all the other agencies again, especially since we're still in contact with DEC over the animals that are at the site. I mean, I don't think we ever got a final response from them. And they know that that has nothing to do with the actual bulkhead repair.
Well, colleagues, what do we say?
So sorry, Victoria, the decision then is that we don't yet know how to answer B, because we know that we don't want the acreage to reflect only the bulkhead repair, but we need clarity on how much of the total acreage is impacted by the dock operations, the commercial dock operations.
I was suggesting that if, normally this question would be answered with just the part that will be physically changed, which is the bulkhead, but because this is unique, that would be in operations, that we put in the larger area of the dock, but we add some kind of asterisk or notation. They may need to annotate their EAF that says, physical change will be 0.00344 acres for dock repair. However, entire site is being reviewed by planning board for continued operation or something to that effect. So it's clear to someone reading it that there's, two things that you're looking at.
Oh, we're looking at one thing triggered by the other thing.
Right, and again, I just want to say that had they done this the right way and came in and asked for this approval of the change to the dock before they did the work, this would have been the correct answer, 0.00344, which would have been the change to, you know, that they're proposing from what exists on site to what's going. So again,
Sure. But I mean, if they had simply gone to Craig and said, "Hey, Craig, we need to repair our things. Can you give us an order to repair?" Then we wouldn't be sitting here at all, right? Because we wouldn't have had the triggering event, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
the form
how I
doesn't,
wish they had.
the form doesn't fit our needs. So all I'm suggesting
Right.
is that we have it annotated so that it's clear. It expresses what you want it to express.
I just want to comment as well. I don't think that's accurate, Victoria, in the sense that if they had come to us from the beginning and done the right thing, the same thing would have happened in terms of our review of the entire dock operations. It was just a long, convoluted process to get there, including ZBA's input, including a year plus of court deliberations.
No, there would have
So-
been no question about whether or not the use was non-conforming.
It would have triggered the exact same review we're doing now.
Sure, the same review would have been triggered, but if you didn't grant the permit, they would still get to exist as a pre-existing non-conforming use, right? Or they would still be allowed to operate because they wouldn't have done something that triggered that review without getting your approval first.
They would have come to us for for work on the dock,
Mhm.
and that would have triggered operation review.
Correct, but there would have been no question that they can operate while you were reviewing it.
That's what's happening now.
Okay, it's fine. I think we're down in the weeds and we don't need to be. Let's just get this.
So may I just ask what the consensus of the board is to identify under A, the entire acreage owned by the applicant, so A and C being equal? Is that the consensus of the board?
I think so.
Okay.
At least that's
I
my
thought-
understanding.
Okay, and the total acreage physically disturbed, that's where it sounded like the consensus was to put the 12.3 acres there, and have an annotation that acreage is for the dock parcel only, or did I?
I agree with that.
The annotation in A is that it includes existing roads, but not any proposed improvements, which are the subject of a separate and different application. And then B, yeah.
Well, we've got to sync the numbers to the text. So if it's dock parcel only, then I would make number item B item A, because the first thing you see is 115, and then it says next to that acreage identifies area used by commercial dock operations. The second thing says 12.4, and that's dock parcel only, does not include acreage of area used to access to the dock parcel. Right? Then they're actually in the same order as the form. So then my question is, do we need to, I'm really sorry that we're taking this long, but do we need to look at section C again about involved agencies? I just want to make sure that the review that took place on a much more narrowly bracketed project description does not need to go to other involved and interested agencies. So Ryan, can you take us back up to C?
I can. Or this section,
B,
right, Larry?
sorry. Yeah. I did have a question about the zoning board of appeals. If we are actually considering the 115 acres, the roadway, which is part of the CR district, runs through the RC district. And do we need to notify them of that reality? And as also, that is since the 2011 zoning, is a protected wetlands.
And in addition to that, I came across this a while ago. It was in Pit and Quarry magazine. The contract between Wholesome and Colarusso had an additional caveat. And I'll read the paragraph that it's in. In addition, the contract between companies prohibits Colarusso from distributing or altering the water, vegetation, soil, or bed of open water and wetlands in the conservation property of the South Bay without written permission from Wholesome. So that's another layer that they have to deal with if they're going to do anything on the roadway through the bay.
I'm impressed you read Pit and Quarry magazine.
Well, when you start doing research on stuff, you find all kinds of things, you know?
Hey, John, can I just clarify that the roadway doesn't actually go through their conserved area? Their conserved area is on the left and the right of the road. The road doesn't go through the conserved area. So you don't have to worry about that part.
Well,
Fifth
Avenue goes through Manhattan.
It still has to be considered, just as part of the whole process. And even though it's not, you're limited to whatever space you have if it's that literal. So, and that's probably a conversation for another time. But since I saw it and since we were in that area, I thought I'd bring it up.
You send that to us all, John?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so there's a question on the ZBA, and is there a resolution on, ZBA approval from the city's perspective and whether it is needed?
So let's see, this is not something that I'm familiar with because I've been looking at the 12.4 acre site. So I cannot give an opinion on this issue.
So I can pull this, I should be able to pull this up quickly. And I think it's in.
Ryan, I think Dave Clauser in your firm did quite a lot of work on this.
Yes, we did. So I'm pulling up that letter. There we go. Okay, so this is a letter from our office. Move something here on my shared screen. Okay, so you should be seeing a letter here dated November 10th, 2017, from Barton and LaJudas to the city ZBA. And we were tasked with kind of going through, and let me just kind of circulate down to this excerpt of the city zoning map. And this entire discussion about the kind of this darker green corridor path through the RC district. So the CR district as it passes through the RC district, and how it is, shown on the zoning map that it does not follow the Flagstaff portion of the property to South Front Street. And we were tasked with reviewing the kind of the formative documents that went behind creating this current zoning map, And this was in regard to the Hall Road application itself and not in regard to the commercial dock operation conditional use permit application. So you'll see the reference to the Hall Road here in that alignment shown there. So I believe the determination of the zoning board after review was that the zoning map, you know what, I'm not going to speak to it because it's a number of years ago, and I don't know if somebody from the city can speak to it because it was a pretty specific determination from the zoning board.
I believe the words they used were the map is the map.
Essentially, that was my interpretation as well. That maybe the intent did not line up with the map, but that the map was the map.
Okay, so Ryan, this is before I was on the board. Could you forward this to all the current board members?
Well, Larry, it's on the city website.
I know, but the city website is very hard for me. But okay, okay. But then let's go back to the map as a map because I love that. So can you go back up to where the to the map where they drew on their? Yeah.
This was an
Okay.
annotation that we
Right.
put together
So-
just for the record.
Right. Okay. So part of the blue line is in the RC zone, which would just mean that we need to let them know that we are doing seeker review on commercial dock operations, inclusive of roads providing egress and ingress to the dock component of the property. And do they have any comments or questions about the road going through the RC district? That seems like an easy thing to do.
Okay, so we are that. So the determination of the planning board is, with the ZBA's determination that the map is the map, the Hall Road as it exists today and not the proposed Hall Road crosses through both it crosses through the RC district and the I-1 industrial district and needs that those are not permitted, or the transshipment or access to and from as it's defined in the code, not a permitted use within the RC district.
Well, but we also have the RCS there too, right? Because that's where you turn. That's where you make the U-turn, isn't it?
So that's, and I'll explain and then I'll defer to Victoria. So once the line here in red is the private parcel boundary. So it passes through the RC that's on a public right of way. So I believe in prior discussions that does not impact the review of it.
We can ask the ZBA for that determination.
Yeah, I like the ZBA's determination and
Okay, so we're going to planning board.
so.
Next one down, Ryan. It's down below.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So I guess I don't understand then so Larry, I think we've been speaking past each other for a few months because every time you bring up the Hall Road, I'm thinking of improvements. So if the use is not permitted, what are you asking the zoning board to do? I mean, are you just asking them to render an opinion or are you asking them to give a use variance? I mean, I'm trying to understand what jurisdiction, I mean, what you're asking the zoning board to do or what you think they would be doing.
I don't know.
And Victoria Melkonian already decided that when you sued the city and sued this Colarusso and the town of Greenport, Judge Malconian decided that the Hall Road was in the CR district.
Okay, I'll pull up that decision.
So do we want to just highlight this? I know the intent was to finalize part 1 and 2 tonight, but do we want to highlight this in the essence of time, and then identify exactly what should be, what approval should be identified here?
Sure.
Okay. So we've got the site plan conditional use permit by the planning board, the floodplain development permit, we added that. We're going to look into, Victoria's going to look into what ZBA review and approval may be necessary. Any other items under government approvals?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, let me,
Although, what about DEC? Now they're involved because of the Peregrines. Oh, there it is, NYSDEC docks, moorings and platforms, but what about the wildlife?
I think you can just take out docks, moorings, and platforms and just leave DEC generally.
Okay.
and I'm going to do the same for DOS as well and Army Corps. And we're just going to, you know, identify the agencies here and okay. Any other questions, concerns on this section? All right. So I believe we left off on.
Oh, wait, hold on. I had some questions about, you're going a little fast.
Yeah. Where are we going back up to, Larry?
Just where we left off at the end of that last section of B.
Yeah.
I want to reread
so,
in light of what we just did.
Yep.
Now, what I mean, Ryan, is can you go back up to the end of B?
Oh, the end of B. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, on C2B,
Uh-huh.
I think it's program and not plan. LWRP is program.
Correct. All right. So the end of B here, coastal resources. So we are selected yes for 1 and 2 and no for the coastal erosion hazard area.
Okay.
So with all those changes in mind, adopted land use plans. So these would still all remain checked yes.
Brian, where do we put in that we're also talking about a significant coastal fish and wildlife habitat? I don't know where that belongs, but I'm wondering if it goes to the Hudson River Estuary Program.
Say again, the resource or the concern?
Significant coastal fish and wildlife habitat is identified.
So there are some questions. Further down, specifically about species, species of concern, threatened, endangered species. So I think it would be more appropriate. This is specifically in regard to land use plans, and that seems like an item that would be appropriately identified, under the sections on protected species.
Okay, just so long as it's somewhere.
I think DEC and the feds both have a Fish and Wildlife Service. I don't know if they would be the ones that might be included, but
Okay. So under zoning, is the site of proposed action located in municipality? Yes, the zoning classification. So we're in the Poor Riverfront, and then also the RC district, I1 district, and I believe those are all the districts within the city that it passes through.
I think that's right, Ryan.
Okay. Is the use permitted or allowed by special use or conditional use permit? So it is allowed by conditional use permit within the CR district. Prior to this, and not knowing where the conversation was going this evening, I can't speak to the RC and the I1, but I believe, you know, the conditional use permit language is in the CR code. So I can pull that up unless Victoria or somebody else has the code up and handy already.
I'm sorry, I have the code up. What section are you looking for?
Whether the Hall Road, the existing Hall Road is permitted or allowed by special or conditional use permit within the RC or the I1 district.
So it's not explicitly called out in the RC. I'm looking for the I1. Is that the IRC, the institutional residential? No, or
It's
industrial?
industrial, the last remaining little bit of industrial.
So, I mean, I don't see Hall Road called out as a specific use in either of those districts. But, you know, I think that's not the end of the story. I have to look into a few other things.
So it's this next C. I don't think they're asking for any sort of a zoning change, but this is where we wonder if the zoning board should weigh in with a variance or a yes or a no. Am I right, board?
I would feel more comfortable with that. But as Victoria pointed out, I don't really know what we'd be asking them.
Well, I had thought that we might need an interpretation from the zoning board in any event regarding the scope and intensity of the project, and, you know, whether the language in the zoning law limits it as of that particular date of adoption or whether it can be expanded. So it may be that we want to ask the Zoning Board of Appeals two questions. One having to do with intensity and the other having to do with the roadway.
I would love that.
But yeah.
I think if we're going to do that, the questions have to be very, very specific and hopefully require some research. Not, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Because, you know, a simple yes or no, I mean, I just get a little concerned about that, but
Right.
Okay. So it sounds like some of this is going to be readdressed based on those responses.
I
well,
would say yes.
I just want to repeat that if we're going to ask an opinion of the zoning board, then, and Teresa, you can speak up here. I think that the questions have to be very, very specific that we ask, and that it should require some research on the zoning board's part.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that they'll do it,
Exactly.
whether you ask specific questions or not.
Teresa's on the zoning board for many, many years.
So whatever we do is going to be up to them once we turn it over to them.
Well, I mean, again, you guys don't need to decide right this moment. We can take it up again at another meeting.
Yeah, I think we should have more discussion on that. Just
Okay.
So that brings us back, unless there's any changes here under C4, that brings us back to D1 C, which asks whether this is the proposed action is an expansion of an existing project or use. The answer selected on the form was no. Okay.
Stop for a second. I mean, clearly there's the issue of truck counts and truck volumes. And if we're looking at the operations here, which we are, there's no doubt, based on our analysis, there's potentially dramatic increase in truck counts and
Intensity of use, I think, is how we would put it. Yes.
expansion of existing project or use. The answer is yes.
And so we will need to fill in a percentage increase, and that would be, the unit would be in truck trips.
Yes.
Yes, and we have that percentage somewhere. Big one.
1 second.
I'd add to and from the dock.
Yeah,
My memo on that. I had from the, again, I know we've been around trying to find, or been around a little bit in circles looking for 2011 numbers, but if 2015 is any indication of the general level, between the proposed and that level is a 1,290% increase per my number crunching.
I think, Clark, I think what we've been talking about is that because the board is looking at worst case scenario, because that's what we're obligated to do. So we're looking at 284, right? Truck trips a day as opposed to the average now of 30 to 40. So on an average day, we're looking at apparently 473% more heavy trucks to our waterfront.
That's similar to what I have too from
And then it says-
2019.
Yeah,
We also have the issue.
a 1,300% increase over 2015, yeah. 250.
We also have the issue of barge traffic.
Yeah.
And my understanding of our previous discussions of truck traffic is that the limiting factor on the truck thing is actually the time that it takes to fill a barge. And we haven't really looked at barge traffic, and we certainly haven't looked at it in light of the application in front of Germantown to increase barge moorings specifically from this parcel.
to date, I don't believe any information on gross number of barges out of the dock has been provided by the applicant in the project record.
Well, should it be, Ryan?
Based on the concern that Larry has just voiced, if that's a request that the planning board wants to make to the applicant to provide the number of similar to the data that they provided on truck trips, but for barges or tonnage leaving the dock.
With this increase in truck traffic, in truck traffic, due to the
they're likely to be tied.
right. So yeah, I think we should get that info.
It's also relevant because we've had a very hard time sort of getting our heads around. Well, I'm going to forget the number, but 325.17.f.1, which requires us to look at views from the river, as well as, from the river looking back at the property. And I think the barge activity would be relevant to helping us understand that.
There are times when there are a number of barges docked there at the same time.
The planning board is making a formal recommendation from the applicant to provide barge quantity data from the time that they acquired the parcel to the current date. And I believe the applicant's engineer and applicant's attorney, I believe, are still all on.
Yes, but Ryan, aren't we also asking what the barge traffic will be if they have this increase in truck trips?
They have provided information on how many, well, let me phrase it this way. The maximum of 284 trips per day is based on, that number is generated based on barge capacity. So the barge numbers, just like the truck numbers that we see, they're not hitting that maximum, every day. That's a maximum governing value. And that is calculated by how many barges that they can load under their, with their current equipment, their current bulkhead length, and so forth.
I think I'm not asking this well. Right now, they are not making 280 plus trips every day. What would we want to know? How many barges they will need if and when they are making 280 plus trips a day?
I believe, yeah. I mean, that information we can request as well. I think we could calculate it, but it doesn't hurt to just have them provide that as a prior look back on barge traffic, as well as a maximum maximum number of barges as well.
So can we just change that then to units to barge and truck trips to from dock? Or truck and barge, whatever you want to say. Barge and truck, truck and barge.
I want to ask a question. Hello?
Teresa, go ahead.
How do the barges come in?
They're pushed by tug.
So is it one barge per tugboat?
Not always. There are times when there are sometimes 2 or 3 barges per tugboat.
And what does the tugboat run on?
Diesel. Yeah.
Yes.
So does that spill out into the Hudson River in some way?
Does it spill out into the river?
Yeah, like, when it's running, the emissions go out in the Hudson River.
Well, they go into the air, over the river. Yes, yeah.
So how many, would that matter? How many tugboats? No.
Well, usually there's a tugboat and sometimes several barges.
For the maximum amount of trucks? You don't know that. Or we
Right.
don't know that.
Wouldn't
They
know
don't
that.
know that. Well, my question really is, would the tugboats have anything to do with the operation or pollution or anything to do with the area? Will it affect our area in any way? If
Yes,
they went from 8 tugboats to 16 because they increased, would that affect the area?
yes, it does. Turbidity, pollution.
So don't we, I mean, can we look at that too?
It's all part of the impacts.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd be totally fine by saying truck, barge, and tug trips to from dock.
Okay.
At the time when they first applied for the haul road, it was 284 trips per day is what they were saying was their existing trip usage.
Their existing max, correct. Although John Privatera has insisted that we can't put any limits on the upside number.
Well,
But that
I mean, as part of the seeker review though, for that project, it was kind of limited to the 284 trips per day. Right? I
That
mean,
was because of the equipment that they have down there. They can't apparently load more than that in a day onto a barge. But John has been very clear that this board can't limit
Well,
any upsides, which means that the mitigations become
well,
very
Well,
impacts
I
are enormous.
I don't think that we necessarily agree with that position, that it can't be limited.
Well, but
I'm
also,
just pointing out that the applicant has said that that's not something that we can limit, which means that the impacts could be larger than what we're talking about here.
I think-
I think, Betsy, the applicant states, but I think we should find out for ourselves just to be sure.
You know, I think this goes to a very important conceptual issue that we are confronting. Because if you listen to Bill Sharp's full audio, the hour-long one, you know, I think that part of the issue is by keeping the road narrow and unpaved, that was a natural check on volume. So that rather than regulating the volume of trucks, the city made us do what we're doing right now, right? Which is that at any point they expand the footprint of the infrastructure, then necessarily there could be an expansion of operations or intensity of use. And the way that they check that in 2011 is by focusing on the infrastructure, and that that was a way of, in a way, sort of back regulating activity on the dock, and then putting it to the future planning board and the non-existent LWRP commission to reconcile any change.
That's right, Larry. That was the big compromise in 2011. Was that the road would be used in 2 directions for ingress and egress, and it was not to be paved, expanded, or moved. And that was the great compromise in 2011.
So
That was
to
what
the,
the zoning did.
to the extent that you are not considering changes to the haul road as part of this, does that infrastructure limit the number of trips that you're reviewing or that are possible?
Well, I think the whole point, Victoria, was that it was a self-limiting in the zoning, that road to the dock could only be one, it had to be used in 2 ways and could not be widened. So in and of itself, that creates a barrier to the upsides of having too much traffic on that road.
Well, I mean, this is the applicants, what they're asking for anyway, so they can, whatever is here, that's fine, but we can talk about mitigation, you know, later on.
can I just comment that, am I correct that, yes, you know, they're allowed this 280 something trucks, and, you know, it was in some way controlled by what happened in 2011. But I believe that Colarusso has said that they've only had 280 something trucks like twice a year or something, that rarely happens. Am I remembering that right?
I think you are, Laura, but we've got to look at the worst case scenario.
I know, Betsy. I know. I see what you're saying. And I guess I'm saying that 280 something trucks every day is not something that, you know, that we hope for.
So I guess when it comes to the 284 and then the average number that was presented for the Hall Road application, what has been, I guess, why those numbers come into play is the Town of Greenport's coordinated seeker review for the Hall Road project made the determination that a maximum of 284 trips per day and the average presented in the project file there would not result in significant adverse impacts to the environment. So that is to say that if the anything more than that has not been reviewed under seeker because it was not part of the application at that time. If that, I don't know if that provides any clarification or if that makes sense, that it's not necessarily an upper limit on approval, but that is what has been reviewed under seeker to this point.
I think it's worth noting as well, and I know this gets complicated, but it's worth noting that per Colarusso's statement, as I recall it, there's a statement made in the application that, based on no current plans to expand, meaning there may be some future plans to expand. And it just seems, I guess, paradoxical to me that we're now reviewing a project with we're looking at the impacts, but their application clearly says, oh, by the way, we're not committed to these caps.
Yeah, but I mean, you can approve it a certain way, and then when they pass those thresholds, it would require another review. So, I mean, just like saying, I'm building a single family home, I have no plans to expand, but in 5 years you come back and put an addition on. So you still have the ability to review those changes if they're proposed later on.
Ken, you've been waiting patiently.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to clarify from the traffic study to Laura's comment on the number of truckloads. The peak that we had in 2019 was 132 truckloads, and the average was 57. So those numbers, double them, call it 264. That would give you the comparison, 264 to the 284 as being the maximum condition.
I'm sorry, can you repeat those numbers?
Sure. I'll point you to where it is in the October 30th, 2020 traffic study on page 4, below the couple of charts. We say that the number of truckloads generated in 2019 had an average of 57 loads per day, an 85th percentile of 91 loads, while the peak was 132 loads. And then that, as it relates to the previously identified maximum condition of 142 truckloads, all those numbers being a one-way trip. Obviously, when the truck goes down to the dock, it's got to return back to the quarry. So doubling those numbers, doubling the 142 will get you your maximum of the 284 that is, I think everyone's familiar with.
Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
Okay. Can we?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ken.
Okay. So the city's requesting additional information in regard to barge quantities, and if they have available information on tug traffic. However, it's not, and that may be something that they don't have in-house. I'm not sure. But those information requests have been made, and we'll look forward to getting that information. So we'll move along to item D then, unless there's anything else there. Item D is in regard to subdivision, and whether the proposed action includes any subdivision. So that is checked no. There's no proposed lot line adjustments or subdivisions as part of the action. Item E, will the proposed action be constructed in multiple phases? Again, here checked no. Item F is regarding residential uses. The proposed action does not include any, so that is checked no. Item G, does the proposed action include new non-residential construction, including expansions? They have checked yes. The number of structures identified on the site is 1, being the storage building. Or, you know what, no, I think they're identifying the bulkhead as the structure, as 12 foot by 2 foot by 75 foot. So does it include new non-residential construction? There are no new structures proposed. However, I defer, in terms of legal and definitions of terms for structures on this site. There are the two structures, being the storage building and the silo.
So this question hinges on that very basic definition we talked about at the beginning of our meeting, right? That I have no problem with this thing being exclusive, the answer to this question being exclusively about the bulkhead repair, but there's a couple of factors. It's not just the bulkhead itself, but the revetment along the waterfront, if it's just about that scope of work that we're talking about. But also, I would like if somehow we could put a caveat in here that this is just about the triggering event, not about the actual 115 acres.
Couldn't we even just answer this no, since we're not talking about the bulkhead repair?
No, but we are. The bulkhead repair is part of this application, even though they've done it already. You're supposed to, as if they didn't do it already.
Right. So,
I mean, I think it's fine because there's not other construction that's going to happen. Everything else.
Yeah, I'm fine with this. Yeah, but is that, so there's two parts, right? There's the steel barricade or the bulkhead, right? And there's also a run of riprap, which is like stacked up rocks that act as a break to the water. Didn't they do both of those things? Well, isn't one of them? They're separate, aren't they?
Yes. So both of those items were completed under the permits that were granted in 2015 or 16, under the work that was completed then. There was the erosion control project on or component on the west side of the site that was riprap installation, and then there was the bulkhead replacement, Larry. Yes.
So the triggering event, is it the riprap and the steel plating, or is it one of them? I mean, I think if the triggering event is both of them, they both need to be here.
Is riprap a structure?
Riprap is rock. It's an erosion control.
Yeah, I don't think we call that a.
So,
but it's
so
funny.
this, I guess, yeah, the question here is what is a structure in terms of who wrote this form? and we could, discuss all the different definitions of structure. However, under the city code, the triggering events, I do, it's any improvement to land, altered, paved, you're all familiar. So as a triggering event, that shoreline restoration work would be a triggering event in itself. But under this question, whether it's a structure or not.
Well, why can't we just answer it instead of a number, just say shoreline improvements? And then give the dimensions of that improvement. And then we don't have to worry about the definition.
Okay.
Yes, remembering that this is, it's our form to amend. This could be another note. Project also included X number of feet of riprap for erosion control.
The code enforcement officer determined that that was a repair not covered by it and was not a trigger. So the order to remedy only covered the bulkhead repair.
Thank you, that's helpful.
It is helpful.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Repair or restoration?
I would say repair.
Yeah, I think I can live with repair.
Okay. In this item 2 asks for the largest, or the largest proposed structure. And so these dimensions are representative of the bulkhead itself. And I can
Which makes sense.
pull up. Yeah. Okay. So we're good with these selections now for G?
I'm fine with that.
Yes.
Okay. H, does the proposed action include construction or other activities that will result in the impoundment of any liquids? So there is an existing basin on the site that was formerly lined when the site was used for salt storage and shipping. The liner has been removed from that, but site runoff does continue to go there. There's no proposed modifications as part of as any triggering event or under the existing or continued dock operation. All right, no concerns there?
No.
So we move on to D2 regarding project operations. A asks whether there's any excavation, mining, dredging during construction operations or both. And this doesn't include general site work to complete the project. So they have selected no for this question.
Wouldn't the shoreline repair require?
I think the interpretation here would be, the shoreline work would be under site preparation, grading, call it kind of falling under that, same as paving or any other type of work like that. That there's not an ongoing, essentially mining or dredging operation, or whether it's construction or operations. Okay. Item B, proposed.
Ryan, hold on. So there's some boxes we didn't check. So will there be on-site dewatering? That's sort of NA, right?
So these sub questions, you only need to go through if you select yes.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry.
Item B, would the proposed action result in alteration, increase, decrease, encroachment into any existing wetland, water body, shoreline, beach, or adjacent areas? So they have selected no. And this will, this is going to be a definition, type just like in the code. So in an alteration of any water body, shoreline, beach adjacent area, based on, the shoreline work and the bulkhead work, there was, there is a proposed alteration in those regards.
Well, it seems to me that we absolutely have to answer this one yes, because we're looking at the entire 115 acres and the Hudson River, but also the South Bay, which has a technical name. Hold on one second.
The significant coastal fish and wildlife habitat.
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's your answer to your question, Betsy. Where does it? Where do we put that in?
Fish and
Area?
wildlife habitat, Ryan. So just before habitat, stick in fish and wildlife.
Okay. Okay. Describe how the proposed action would affect that water body or wetland. Proposed action includes alterations to shoreline of Hudson River by installation of riprap, revetment, and replacement steel, replacement bulkhead. And then any other items to note here?
Well, again, these forms aren't written for our purposes, and we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do about that. But I think this is an opportunity for us to determine whether we have the volume of activity running across the private road and the grade crossings. Does that impact at all the wetlands, the culverts that run through the wetlands, I just lost what I was going to say. We haven't looked at what having 284 truck trips a day does to the part of the parcel that is east of the tracks, and I don't see how we include that, but it seems to me that we can't not include it.
Yeah, it's tough because the town found that the expansion of the road and 284 trips would not have any impact on the environment, and all these things, and they made secret findings. So, I mean, for purposes of part one, you can check yes, but I think that everyone should go back and look at the findings about the road that the town made when you get into it. And if you're going to find otherwise, you'd have to have a basis for that.
It was a rail line at one point in time, a rail spur, for what that's worth.
Well, and Larry, to your point of these forms, there's the terms that they use, the questions they ask don't fit what you're trying to convey. Part three is going to be, a number very lengthy, and that's where the planning board is going to fully expound on why the planning board's making the determinations that they are at that point, to say why certain items may result in impacts or why they won't. So that area it's going to be a blank document to be filled out, and all of those thoughts and considerations can be contained in that section. Part 1 identifies kind of what exists out there that could be impacted. Part 2, you make your determinations whether, you know, we went through that for a number of months, and Part 3 is where you explain everything and make your determination. So there's going to be an opportunity in Part 3 to, I think, capture some of those lingering items that just don't fit anywhere else.
Right, but shouldn't we make reference to our concern here? You know, that we need to look at it, that the proposed action may impact protected wetlands, or whatever the phrase was moved.
There's another section that deals with wetlands,
Oh,
right, Ryan? If we move forward, I
Yes.
think there's a
Yep.
section. So, I mean, you could put it here as well, but
okay. Just maybe just say
Continued operation.
continued commercial dock
May-
operations may affect adjacent wetlands or something to that effect.
Okay. Will the proposed action cause or result in disturbance of bottom sediments? The selection was no, as submitted by the applicant. So disturbance of bottom sediments could be through installation of really any structures or any work within that's going to, you know, be in the vicinity of bottom sediments. So there, you know, while the work has been completed, the work along the shoreline could result in the disturbance of bottom sediments.
Not really bottom sediments though. I mean, isn't that from dredging? I mean, it is a shoreline, but I don't know.
I want to just chime in here too, because clearly increased barge traffic would probably do that as well, wouldn't it? I know it's a deep water port, but I know it's ongoing confusion versus, you know, looking at construction versus operations here, but I would argue there's potential bottom sediment disruption in that sort of ecosystem, which is clearly the point of this whole thing, with increased barges.
this is a stupid question, but do barges touch the ground?
No.
Probably
no.
not there. It's a deep water port,
Mhm.
so it's dredged down deep enough.
So, I mean, what you could do here is write yes and then say potential for, but then you're gonna have to expound on it in part 3, why or why not. It won't.
That sounds right.
Well, is this where we should be considering the culverts as well? That run under the road? We haven't really talked much about them, and they're a potential big problem.
Culverts exist, right?
Yes, they do. And they're very old.
Culverts exist. They're I believe, an old concrete structure that's lined with newer pipe culverts. And those are, you know, submerged during high tide. I don't believe there's been any inspections, internal inspections completed. That was an item that was requested during the Hall Road seeker review to do internal inspection through closed circuit television cameras, but that information has not been provided. There is no proposal to replace or alter, but they do exist.
I do remember, Ryan, in one of the early Barton and LaJudas memos that was a concern and a request, that those things be inspected to make sure that they could actually bear the weight, particularly if 2 trucks pass simultaneously over a culvert.
Well, how do we want to word it? But that's not really bottom.
There is no proposal to change those culverts. They were designed and built a long time ago. They used to have 4 sets of train tracks sitting on them. I've submitted pictures of that. The trains are certainly a lot heavier than any trucks that might just ride over it.
But Pat, those culverts are old now. They're way older than when those trains were running over them.
Concrete gets harder with age. Those things would probably be pretty hard to break up now.
Were the culverts lined during Colaruso's ownership or prior to that? And why were the culverts lined if the concrete culvert was in good shape?
I think they were extended, possibly back in the St. Lawrence cement days when they were, trying to cut back on erosion on the, let me guess, that would be the south side. I think that's where they got extended. They're not lined all the way through. It's just on the south side. I think they added some extra pipe because the banks were falling in.
I think it's true, concrete gets harder with age, but concrete also deteriorates after a certain point, I believe.
Yeah, if it's on a bridge and they're throwing salt on it, the salt will eat up any kind of concrete. But I mean, if you
The
go
water there is salt water.
It's all
just
tidal
FYI.
water.
oh,
It's
there's not very much salt in there. I don't think we have brackish water up that far.
Well, okay, so if they're not being removed or altered, what is the change that we're reviewing?
I think my only concern, since we were talking about potential for disturbance due to barge traffic, so we're sort of anticipating that there could be increased barge traffic the same way that we're anticipating that there could be increased truck traffic, which could stress those culverts. It's the
So
same.
may I ask a legal question? The replacement, if those culverts needed to be replaced in the future, if they failed or needed to be replaced, that would be likely a triggering event. And under the city code, would the applicant have to come back before the planning board for review of that?
Are the culverts in the district that has triggering events, or are they in the other district?
They're in
They are right out here. So it's going
in the
to kind of
RC.
cross.
So I don't know if we can answer that question yet, because we haven't sorted out how triggering events.
We're in the triggering event. There's not another one, right? Right. I mean, this is the triggering event, right? I mean, assuming that we get through this process before the end of time, were the applicant to get their conditional use permit, there is no more triggering event because.
No, I think they would have to come in for any other work to the dock, anything else that they change. They'd have to get an amended permit. But I don't know.
Isn't that a building permit that they get from Craig? Not from, I mean, it doesn't seem to me if it meets code and the code inspector reviews it and doesn't have an issue and there's no site plan review required by the code. I mean, I don't know, but it seems to me that I mean, I would hate to own land that every time I wanted to do something, I caused a triggering event that resulted in a multi-year review. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
325.17.1 I'm gonna skip over the top, but it says, nor shall any land or improvement thereon be constructed, altered, paved, or improved, rebuilt, or in whole or in part for any purpose in the core riverfront district, except for the following conditional uses, subject to approval of the planning board in accordance with Article 8 thereof. So whether they would need to come back again, I mean, it's a legal question, but I just raise it for the concern of the culverts if they need to be replaced in the future. If they do need to be replaced in the future, they would need DEC and or permits at that time as well.
Well, if those culverts aren't in the core riverfront, I mean, that's what I was getting at before, then they might not be subject to those core riverfront provisions in any event, but.
Well, I'm going to just draw a line, but they cross through the core riverfront district from RC to RC.
Mm-hmm.
A portion of those culverts does pass through the core riverfront district.
It's just a caution. I think it could be a problem. I think it could be a problem.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem like it's a bottom sentence issue. it seems like another, well, let's just see what, if there's a spot down below where we can,
All right. Well, it sure would be if they went bad. But anyway, okay.
Well, so, I mean, again, I think we can put, if the board were to approve this project, there could be restrictions placed that any future things like this could trigger additional review. So that, there was a reviewing body to review any impact to wetlands, should something take place in the wetlands area.
Okay.
So I think we'll find a place to note your concern and then address it in the part 3.
And perhaps it's a part 2 concern and not, excuse me, and not a part 1 concern, to be fair.
Okay. Will the proposed action cause or result in the destruction or removal of aquatic vegetation? And it has been selected no under the current iteration of the form.
well, it's the same question over and over again, right? That if we're actually looking at the 116 acres, that there is a series of aquatic plants that exist along the private road and the causeway, and those may be impacted by the operations here. It doesn't seem like any of it's going to be removed. I don't know how to handle this.
So, yeah, I think you can address potential impacts from traffic in part 2, because this project does not propose, like if they were building a road, they'd be proposing to take out an acre of vegetation, right, and they're not proposing to remove or just anything, right, or to destroy anything.
Like asking about aquatic vegetation that would be, so if the culverts were being replaced, the selection would be yes. Right. If there's going to be underwater vegetation disturbed. Okay. And then item 5 under here is describe any proposed reclamation mitigation following disturbance. None is proposed.
Okay.
We'll move along to item C. Regarding new demand for water, there is no new demand for water being created by the continued dock operations. So this is checked no. Item D is regarding liquid wastes. Again, whether the proposed action will generate liquid wastes. And, specifically sanitary sewage, industrial wastes, not stormwater runoff. That's discussed later in the form, so it's selected no here. And then this item E, will a proposed action disturb more than 1 acre and create stormwater runoff either from new point sources or non-point sources during construction or post-construction? So this question and the 1 acre threshold in New York State is, I'm sure most of you are familiar. If you disturb 1 acre or more of earth, you're required to have a construction speedies permit issued through the DEC. So when it's asking about disturbance here, the direction of the question is in that regard. So the applicant is not under the continued dock operations project. There is not more than 1 acre of land proposed to be disturbed, and the applicant does not need to get a construction speedies permit. They do, however, for the proposed Hall Road widening, paving project, they do need to get a construction speedies permit there. They've applied for that and I think actually received that. And that was reviewed under the town's secret review of the Hall Road.
I want to comment here as well. I mean, it's the same problem as Larry points out. repeatedly is that we're looking at operations. Clearly, the operations are significantly larger than that 1 acre. And I know there's, debate on continued operations, but if we're all in agreement that the operations per Melconian has been removed or the operations no longer are permitted and they're applying for a permit, and we're looking at it as a new operation coming into that site, and it's 12 acres. I guess I just bring it up again that we're looking at the operations here and not a specific, not just the waterfront work.
Yeah. How much impervious? It's not creating the impervious surface though. It's operating, I'm fine with leaving this like it is, actually. The next one I have an issue with, but this one, I think I'm okay with this one.
Source during construction or post-construction.
Look, I mean, if this were about the paved road, we might have an issue, right? Because that's an impervious surface. But we're not talking about that, right? That's not in front of us now. This is just what's there now. So I think I'm fine with this answer.
Okay, let's move on. I know this is.
Okay, we're moving on to item F. Does the proposed action include or will it use on-site one or more sources of air emissions, including fuel combustion, incineration, or other processes and operations?
You want to guess, Ryan?
The revision would be for yes, mobile sources during project operations. So that's going to include gravel trucks, tugboats, the stationary sources would be the portable, well, I guess that is stationary, calling something portable doesn't work. So portable generator that's used on site.
Loading equipment.
Motor,
Yeah.
other equipment.
Yeah. I think they also use something to spray down the
a watering truck.
The watering
Yeah,
truck.
the water truck. Yeah.
Stationary sources, there are no stationary sources during construction or operations that have been included as part of the application or to my knowledge.
But in back up on mobile sources, there's also that huge front end loader down there. Isn't that what that's called?
It says loader.
Oh, does it say loader?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. I thought the loader was the conveyor that actually.
Oh, yeah. We should actually put. Well, is a generator for the conveyor? The generator is for the conveyor, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess the conveyor. I don't.
Or is it gas or diesel powered?
Oh, okay, that's it.
I know it. I think it's discussed in the noise study, but I can add conveyor.
Okay.
Okay. Will any air emission sources named in D2F above require New York State air registration, air facility permit, Federal Clean Air Act Title 4 or Title 5 permit? And they selected no. None have been. The facility currently operates with no such permits.
Okay.
Item H, will the proposed action generator emit methane? Selected no. Will the proposed action result in the release of air pollutants from open air operations or processes such as quarry or landfill operations? So it is selected no currently. You'll see here described under if yes, one of the examples listed is diesel exhaust, rock particulates, or dust.
Yeah, so I
Both
think we
of
have.
which
So it's yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Item J, will the proposed action result in a substantial increase in traffic above present levels or generate substantial new demand for transportation facilities or services?
Yes.
Yes. So if yes, when is peak traffic expected? Check all that apply. So peak, there is no, the traffic studies provided have a consistent rate of, I think, 12 trips per hour is the maximum, and that would be morning, evening, and the current proposal from the applicant do not use or not truck on weekends, but that's not that's just a proposal from the applicant at this point, I believe. So peak traffic would be kind of consistent throughout the day. Or randomly between the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Do they can? But they can operate on the weekends. Yeah. I mean, as part of a
As of
proposed
right
mitigation.
now.
Yeah,
There is
yeah, as
nothing
of right now.
for them to do that.
They don't, but they're not prevented.
Okay. For commercial activities only, projected number of truck trips per day and type semi/dump and dump trucks. So projected maximum of 284 one-way trips per day. And those are, they're a full semi-trailer.
And dump trucks.
Ryan,
I thought it was 142 one way. Okay, I see what you're
No,
saying.
284 one ways, and it includes
Yeah.
dump trucks.
One-
and nice.
142 truckloads, 284 trips.
Got it.
but I would
And-
say that the 284 are two-way trips, meaning it's a trip going into the site. It's 142 going in and 142 coming out. So it would be 142 truckloads or 284 two-way trips. That clarifies.
Mm.
Thank you.
Parking spaces, they're the most recent site plan. I don't think that there's no striped parking spaces on the site, but I think we roughly estimated there's about 20, at least room for 20 spaces, depending on where they're using for parking, but to stay out of the way. Are we comfortable filling in 20 for both existing and proposed with a net increase of 0? No proposed parking facility per se.
I think that's fine.
The proposed action includes any shared use parking? No. If the proposed action includes any modification of existing road, creation of new roads, or change in existing access, describe.
Knock yourself out.
So from what I've heard this evening from legal counsel, that this review, we're looking at the entire, ingress egress, but there's no proposed modification under the conditional use under the commercial dock operation continuation, I believe, but I guess that's a definition question.
Well, I think we could say, no.
Just
Well, I don't know.
not currently.
Say again, John?
Not currently?
Okay. Are public-private transportation services or facilities available within a half a mile of the proposed site? So the train station at the very least is within a half a mile. Are there any other, we don't need to list them, but we'll select yes there. Will the proposed action include access to public transportation or accommodations for use of hybrid, electric, or other alternative fueled vehicles? There's no part of the proposed action.
That's a no.
That includes, that's a no. Will the proposed action include plans for pedestrian bicycle accommodations for connections to existing routes? Again, there's no part of the proposed action that includes any such accommodations. We'll move along to K. Will the proposed action for commercial or industrial projects only generate new or additional demand for energy? The current form is selected as no in terms of new or additional demand for energy.
Does that include fuel for trucks and?
It does not specify, and that would be, I think that, yeah, could include that, could include mobile. It doesn't necessarily have to be electricity.
No, that's what I was wondering, Ryan. Does it, I mean, there will be.
Ryan, when we went through this in part 2, we definitely, you and I chatted a bit about energy use and
Mobile.
yes, there would be significant additional trucks using fuel. And, tonight we talked more about the additional tugboats using fuel.
This is
So
really
item
about
one.
this is really about electrical demand, though.
It does seem to be about electrical. So
Sorry.
All these are electrical questions. Electrical.
I apologize. You can't see the whole page here, so I know we're.
Substation. Yeah, I would say no to this one.
Yeah, once you get. Yeah, I agree, Larry.
Thanks for clarification, Larry. I can't see the whole page here, so.
Item L is about hours of operation. During construction, there is no proposed construction. There's the retroactive approval the construction that's already occurred. During operations, they have listed 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and holidays.
This should be updated though to reflect their change in that they wouldn't be working on the weekends.
Well, but is that
so they?
We don't have a commitment to that, do we?
They provided that in writing, but I it's not.
Well, that's provided as a mitigation measure and not as the,
It's also changed over the years. So I don't know that there's a commitment to any of that.
Well, when the applicant fixes this, when they make these changes, they should decide whether they want to change the hours.
So the latest proposal is to restrict hauling hours from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Thursday, 7 to 5 Friday, no hauling on weekends or major holidays. However, that is distinct and separate from the dock operations. I know this proposal is specifically for trucking.
Yeah, I would defer to the applicant. If they want to modify the answer, let them modify the answer.
Okay, we will leave it at 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. As currently written, but they can modify it if necessary. Okay, item M. Will the
Okay. Ryan,
Yes,
can I ask
Glenn.
a question? I should have asked this in the beginning. For my questions, I went through part 1 and part 2, and made, requests for changes to part 1 as I did my 3 questions. In this form that we're looking at now, and you made the changes, in part 1, and then added whatever to part 2. In this rendition of part 1, were the changes that were discussed kind of at length in my questions, are they here, or are we're starting from?
Well, Laura, we just got to that point in the form, which is thrilling to me. So you can see, well, I don't know if your screen looks like, but all of our comments are now showing up.
Yeah, that's not my question, Larry.
Oh.
When I'm just.
So yes, as we went through and we marked things up as we went through, those comments are here in red. What we're doing now is we're doing a final iteration of the form that we're kind of making all those changes, and then we will provide this to, or the applicant will in turn submit this with their signature on it.
Okay. Thank you.
So item M, will the proposed action produce noise that will exceed existing ambient noise levels during construction, operation, or both? And it was selected yes. If yes, provide details including sources, time of day, and duration. The explanation is on-road trucks, loaders, hopper conveyor genset, water truck, barges, and material handler for offloading vary infrequently, operate 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. intermittently through the week. And the note that we had from reviewing part 2 is that the spiking of sounds due to idling trucks in queue. So we'll say, in addition to, so the trucks are identified in here, varying material offloading, 7 a.m. intermittently throughout the week, including spiking of noise sources throughout operations. That sounds like it takes into account the comment here. Okay. Will the proposed action remove existing natural barriers that could act as a noise barrier or screen? Selection is no. There's no proposed clearing as part of the application. The applicant has, as part of some mitigation, proposed to put in some barriers, but none is proposed to be removed. We'll move along to N. Will the proposed action have outdoor lighting? They had selected no, but the board wishes to change that to, or the comment is change that to yes. Describe the sources, location, heights of fixture, direction, aim, proximity to nearest occupied structures. So there are eight on the latest site plan. There are eight lamps on the site. We'll say fixed lamps on the site, and those are 2 on the silo 41 feet and 30-foot high. 3, 5 pole mounted lights. And that does not add up to, and oh, there's 6 wall mounted lights. So we have the 8 fixed lamps, and then mobile sources, including limiting me here, including
Barge, tug, and
Barge.
trucks.
tugs, trucks, etc. Okay. Will the proposed action remove existing natural barriers that could act as light barrier screen? And similar to above with noise, there's no proposed barriers that are to be removed. That brings us to O. Does the proposed action have the potential to produce odors for more than 1 hour per day? They did select no. The comment that was provided is that it should be selected yes for, and then the possible sources would be diesel exhaust from trucks idling while in queue and other on-site equipment, including generator.
We also have Teresa's observation about tugboats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Diesel exhaust from trucks idling while in queue. So we'll just list again here barges, tugs, and other on-site equipment.
Yeah, I don't think we have to include, the barges are basically just tubs, so I don't think we have to include those.
All right, any other sources of odors concern? Will the proposed action include any bulk storage of petroleum, combined capacity over 1,100 gallons, or chemical products 185 gallons in above ground storage or any amount in underground storage? This was a question we had on part 2, and I want to get down to the applicant's response there, which was that there's no bulk petroleum stored on site. Further, no fuel is stored on site. It comes in the back of a service truck where machines are refilled from. So the selection of no appears appropriate based on what is part of the project record. Any concerns there? Hearing none, item Q, will the proposed action use pesticides during construction or operations? The selection was no. We did reach out to the applicant on that as well, and they confirmed that. I'm trying to see here if I have their exact response. It does not look like I have it handy here, but they have confirmed that they don't they don't use any pesticides during construction or operations.
Is that true? I mean, how do they keep the crossings at 9 and 9G clear of the reeds and cattails and things that are gathered there.
Lawnmowers.
Yeah, there's no spraying of any pesticides or herbicides. The DEC or the Army Corps would allow you to cut the reeds if that was necessary, but it has never been necessary.
Thank you.
Okay, so item R, will the proposed action involve or require the management or disposal of solid waste, excluding hazardous materials? The selection is no. So solid waste would be general debris and, garbage. There's, I'm sure, some minor, garbage facilities on site for employees, but there's no on-site management or disposal.
I think we can move on, Ryan.
Move along to item S. Does the proposed action include construction or modification of solid waste management facility? No. Item T, will the proposed action at the site involve the commercial generation, treatment, storage, or disposal of hazardous waste? The selection currently is no. None is proposed. Moving on to section E, site and setting of action, existing land uses. Currently, industrial, commercial, aquatic, parkland are selected. A comment during part 2 was to select residential as well. So we'll make that change.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Item B is a table of cover types. So this will need to be revised, and if it's all right with the board, perhaps we can request that the applicant, when they resubmit this, revise these numbers so that they total the 115 acres as opposed to the 12 acres.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we had that. Yeah.
Okay. Brings us to C. Is the project site presently used by members of the community for public recreation? Selected no. Are there any facilities serving children, the elderly, people with disabilities, such as schools, hospitals, licensed daycare centers, or group homes within 1,500 feet of the project site? They have selected yes. The facilities identified were Kite's Nest, Center for Liberatory Education, and the comments or the additions include youth, sailing, and kayaking, the NAC Center, and terrace apartments. Are there any others that we wish to include?
What's liberatory? Liberatory? What is that?
Is this a description of Kite's Nest, or is this something separate?
I got that from their website. I have no idea what it is.
So that's a description of Kite's Nest then, Pat, right?
I
Right,
believe
yeah,
that-
that's from their website. Like I said, I have no
Okay.
idea what that is.
So we'll just leave it as Kite's Nest.
And there's also Basilica.
Hmm.
What about the train station?
I think we talked about this during the,
Yeah. I
I'll add it
remember.
here. I remember we had a long discussion about it. But we'll add it here
Yeah.
again. It doesn't have it.
I think it has to do with the exclusivity. I mean, it's both Basilica and the train station are open to all members of the public. I think the question is specifically oriented towards perhaps underrepresented communities or constituencies that can't have a voice, right? So
Right.
I don't think Basilica belongs on there
Okay.
or the train station.
Fair enough, Larry.
We went through this when we went through the
Yes,
question.
now I'm remembering that. Yes, thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to E. Does the project site contain an existing dam? No. Has the project site ever been used as a municipal, commercial, or industrial solid waste management facility? Or does the project site adjoin property which is now or was at one time used as a solid waste management facility? So the selection was no. However, the comment is that it should be yes due to the South Bay dump. If yes, has the facility been formally closed? So I think it's safe to select yes here as there are no current uses. If yes, cite sources and documentation. It sounded like there were some sources that were familiar to the city in regard to dumping in the or the formal South Bay dump and then other solid waste.
So we know that this has been documented in the local paper, the Register Star.
Okay. Describe the location of the project site relative to the boundaries of solid waste management facility. So I can coordinate response to this item here. Describe any development constraints due to prior solid waste activities. None are known, correct?
I would say
None are
that.
known to the applicant. So moving on to item G, have hazardous waste been generated, treated, and or disposed of at site, or does the project site adjoin property which is now or is at one time used to commercially treat, store, or dispose of hazardous waste? So it was selected as yes. If yes, describe waste handled, management activities, timeline. The project site is adjacent to a site that was owned by Niagara Mohawk, when environmental site cleanup was conducted. Activity was 1853 to 1946. And then, now the Niagara Mohawk Power site, is that that's the same as the MGP site or separate from the MGP site?
It's the MGP site, manufactured gas.
Yep.
Yep.
And we want to list here South Bay dump.
What you might be able to do to just clarify the Niagara Mohawk is just indicate that it's the Dunn warehouse.
So Ryan, you could do that. The project site is adjacent to a site, and then put in parentheses the Dunn warehouse. That was up. Could do it. Okay, yeah, there.
Okay. Any others that are known to the board or the applicant?
No.
Okay. Item H, potential contamination history. Has there been a reported spill at the proposed project site, or have any remedial actions been conducted that are adjacent to the proposed site? Selected yes. And item 1 here, sub-item 1 is any portion of the site listed in the EC spills incident database or environmental site remediation database. So this should be, they've selected yes to the environmental site remediation database. So this is going to be revised to yes, as it is listed here. The DEC number, I will pull this up because it appears that this number should be provided down below, but I will confirm that through the database. If the site has been subject to RCRA corrective actions, describe control measures, that is, the site is not subject to RCRA corrective actions as to any, as part of the project record. Is the project within 2,000 feet of any site in the DEC Environmental Site Remediation Database? Yes. Provide the DEC numbers. These 4 numbers have been provided. If yes to 1, 2, or 3 above, describe current status of the site. So some of the, well, there's explanations for all of these, including the former MGP site, some petroleum usage, and Conrail spills.
And Ryan, I believe that there's still a study to be done about the effluent from that gas plant into the river at the end of the slip in the waterfront park.
I believe that's scheduled for 2022.
Oh, you'd found that out. Good. Good.
Yep.
I wasn't sure when it was, but yeah.
Did I get that right? Effluent from the manufactured gas site to be completed in 2022?
Yeah.
I think it's more than a study. I think it's remediation is to begin.
Oh, is it? I thought I knew that there were some studies done. I didn't think that they had been completed, but they may have been. We can find out.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll move on to sub item 5. Is the project site subject to institutional control limiting property uses? It is not. So that brings us to E2. What is the average depth to bedrock on the project site? The information provided by the applicant is 20 to 30 feet. Are there any bedrock outcrops on the project site? Selection is no. Item C.
I think we went through this one pretty carefully, and I don't recall there being any changes here. E.
Okay. So I'm going to just kind of scroll through here. It's soil, soil characteristics, geological features, surface water features, which have been selected.
Well, we okay, I'm just saying, we did make some changes to.
So let's just pick up and go through the surface water features question. So does any site contains wet water bodies and it adjoins it? Are any of those water bodies regulated? The select yes. The Hudson River is identified. Wetlands, so we'll want to identify the South Bay here as we are now reviewing the entire 115 acres under this form. And
I think
I can provide.
Okay, go ahead.
I will provide the approximate size from the and the wetland number from the environmental resource mapper.
I think that we said that that stream should be class A instead of class C.
Yes. I'm just going to pull up right now the environmental resource mapper, and we can just confirm that and plug that plug in that number.
Was that Class A, Laura? Was that the stream that goes to the aquifer that Greenport uses for their drinking water? Is that Class A stream?
I don't know. I mean, I just remember this being discussed, and I have here class to change to class.
It is. Yeah, it's a Class A stream. The wetland ID is HS2, and that's a DEC wetland. And the approximate acreage is 294.6 acres. And that represents, since we have the ability to share screen, I'll throw that up here. So that is the darker green area here that are the wetlands, approximate wetland limits of the South Bay. And here is, the classification for the Hudson at this location.
So so what's the name of the stream that we're referring to? Is it?
It starts with a K. I just can't remember.
Oh, I see it there. That one,
Yeah, I'm going to turn off the wetland layer. So the stream is here. And it is a Class C stream. There is no name associated with it on here, and it doesn't look like it's labeled on the map as well.
I'm pretty sure that's the one that's Greenport.
Is it Cassowary or one of those?
Cassowary or something like that. Yes, it's very close to that, John. It's yeah. Ugh.
Does anyone, John, you want to take a stab on the spelling of it?
I don't think it starts with a K. I think it's Cassowary, but I'm not positive. I can
our
find
citizens will be telling us in a matter of moments.
You're probably right about that.
Usually John knows this stuff though.
Yeah, it begins with a K, Ryan. It's a Cashaway Creek.
Oh, Cashway, is it a K? All right.
Yeah. And there's an H in there. Cashaway, something like that. Yeah, something like that.
Ashens Creek?
No, Cashaway Creek.
Yeah, I think it's a K, and it's because it came up during the St. Lawrence thing because Greenport was very concerned about their drinking water and that aquifer, and that's where I read about it.
Okay.
How do we? I just got a message saying it's Cashin, Cashins, but
I don't think that's.
Is that another one?
I don't know.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to list the DEC item or number for it, ID. And that way we can, if there's questions, we can go back to that. And if we get additional information on the spelling, we can correct it here.
Great, thank you.
Are any of the above water bodies listed in the most recent compilation of the New York State Water Quality Impaired Water Bodies list? Yes is selected, and the advisory is in regard to, or the impairment is regarding consumption of fish advisory for the Hudson. Anything else to note here? All right. So that moves us down to a couple questions on floodways and floodplains. Is the project site within a designated floodway? And when we went through part 2 of this, reviewing the flood insurance study for the city, which I'm going to try and pull up here, that there is no mapped floodway within the city. I can pull this up. The site is within the 100 and, oh, look at that, right to it. So this is the flood insurance study for the city of Hudson from 1989. And you'll note here, no floodways were calculated as part of this study because the Hudson River is a tidal estuary in the vicinity of Hudson. So that item I here appears to be could be revised to no. However, the yeses for 100-year and 500-year floodplain should remain as yes. Any questions or concerns there?
No.
Okay. L is the project site located over or immediately adjoining a primary, principal, or sole source aquifer. And the selection there again is no, no aquifer. This
I'm gonna double check that, but I don't need to do it now. I might be able to.
there are no sole source aquifers, but when it comes to primary and principal, the mapping of those are not as readily available. So if there are any, Betsy, that get passed along or that you come across, we can select that and name those aquifers there.
Okay, great.
Item M, identify the predominant wildlife species that occupy or use the project site. So deer, woodchucks, coyotes, rabbits, eagles, other birds were identified. And then we have a note here to include fox, otter, mink, ducks, and heron.
1 hour in heaven, Ryan. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah.
And I believe, Steve, is this one of the items that you provided the separate Word document for?
I'm searching for it frantically. Give me a minute and I'll pull that up.
So we can come back to M. These are all regarding threatened endangered species. Does the project site contain a designated significant natural community? Yes. Describe the habitat community function basis for designation. So they note that the Hudson River is adjacent to the site and the river's ledge is habitat. Oh, they say that the river's edge is the habitat, not the project site. Referring back to your comment from earlier, Betsy, the river itself, a significant natural community. And then we are significant, the South Bay being a significant coastal wildlife habitat.
Yes.
I missed one word in it, I know.
Yeah, we would need an is.
And then we have extensive community habitat. So the significant natural community is, since it's the entire river, it's not giving me an acreage on here. But there will be no proposed gain or loss by the project.
Wait, say that again. So
it's asking for extended community habitat in acreage and gain or loss from the proposed action.
Betsy, I had a question about that. Remember when I think we were talking to DEC, and they were concerned about the riprap and whether the Army Corps needed to weigh in on any encroachment or just encroachment of the revetment into the river as a potential issue is I mean, at the minimum, it's that 0.0034 acres, right? Like, that's, I don't know. It seems like if that's an issue, that's good. This is where it would go.
Well, Larry, the Army Corps did review these applications and approve them all. So if they have an issue,
they approved the bulkhead repair work, but the application was substantially misleading in the sense that what we really need to be looking at is the entirety of the operations and not simply the area of the bulkhead work.
no, what I was getting at was they approved the erosion control for the banks of the river as well as the bulkhead replacement.
Okay.
Do this much.
Brian, I found the memo for, I'm sorry, I lost track of it. Are we on N now?
We can go back up to M with predominant wildlife species.
M looks correct, actually. I have.
Okay.
Just for N though.
Okay, for N, significant natural community. So that's identified, yes, with river and the South Bay, identified on the environmental resource mapper.
So what I have are freshwater subtidal aquatic bed, 0.6 acres. Freshwater intertidal mud flat, 1.89 acres. Freshwater tidal creek, 8.49 acres. And then freshwater tidal marsh, 66.69 acres. Freshwater tidal swamp at 23.98 acres. And then shrub swamp at 2.76 acres.
And I'm going to add those from the document, and I'm getting blocked out from typing more. So I have that in my email, and I will get those added.
Okay, I can send this to you directly, Ryan.
Great.
Ryan, I just sent you something too on Cashaway Creek. It's HR tributary 198. And I just sent you the backup for it.
Okay, great. Just go back up and highlight that, or to go back up. Add that in. All right. So we'll go along here, and with the understanding that Steve's done a lot of the work here to plug in some additional information. This one, the lengthy list I know that Steve put together regarding species listed as threatened or habitat thereof. So it is selected, yes. Long-eared bat, bald eagle, leaf spitter were identified. We have a comment here to add a number of other species, and get the entire list there from Steve's research.
Yeah, we'll get it all from Steve. We don't need to go through it tonight because we're going to leave something out undoubtedly. We're getting tired.
Yeah.
Ditto the species that are listed by New York State. I know that's on that list as well.
So we can just append, because there's already a document that we've got on our city website that has a lot of this. So that can be appended
Well-
to this document as well.
The applicant should annotate, should take the EAF and do like a page in the back, and they can include pages from your report, or they can type it out again themselves, but
Okay,
it's got to be their document first. and then-
okay. Well, we've got it all. We've done all the research, and it's posted on the city website.
Q, is the project site adjoining area used for hunting or shell fishing? Yes. Fishing opportunities in the Hudson River and South Bay. So that brings us on to E3. Is the project site or any portion in an agricultural district? It is not. Item B, are agricultural lands consisting of highly productive soils present? They are not. Does the project site contain all or part of or is substantially contiguous to a registered national natural landmark? It is not. Is the project site located in or does it adjoin a state-listed critical environmental area? Selection there is no. And those are all very specific lists. That brings us down to item E. And so we have a comment here, but this is regarding building sites or districts that are listed on or determined to be eligible for the state or national registers of historic places. So it is selected yes due to historic buildings or districts. So in addition to the Dunn Warehouse, and well, all of the additions are here. So Basilica on there, the on-site storage building, and Silo, the train station, the WIC, and the Hudson Athens Lighthouse are all listed here. The project site are there any additions to that? I think we kind of have gone through that quite a bit already.
We have it in part 3 where it says brief description of attributes on which listing is based. It's more than just that one building. So that should be, the applicant, I think, should give more detail there.
All right. Is the project site or any portion of it located in or adjacent to an area designated as sensitive for archaeological sites? Yes. And that's based on the Cultural Resource Information System. Have any additional archaeological or historic sites or resources been identified on the project site? So the selection here is no. And I know there's been, Laura, you provided documentation regarding sites to the north. The question is asking specifically on the project site.
When we discussed this, I didn't recall if there was anything specifically on the project site, although there's a very good question as to whether or not there are archaeological resources in the South Bay.
I mean, I sent you, Ryan, stuff that sent me, Betsy had sent me, hoping that you would go over that stuff because that's kind of beyond my, ability to parse that down. But it seemed to me that I didn't. To me, it wasn't a definitive no. I don't know. Could you look at that stuff I sent you? That Betsy sent me some stuff, John.
I would agree. I mean, so is there a potential for archaeological resources? F is kind of in that regard. It's in an archaeologically sensitive area, and based on archaeological studies conducted essentially adjacent to the site and different scholarship there, that entire area is archaeologically sensitive. the specific question of G, have any archaeological or historic sites or resources been identified on the project site? That should be selected as yes, even from not an archaeological standpoint, even though there's a high likelihood there, but SHPO has determined that the salt storage building eligible resource. So historic site, I think we can select that as yes. Basis for identification, SHPO eligibility determination. So we have revised that to yes and identified the salt storage building there. Is the project site, item H, is the project site within 5 miles of any officially designated and publicly accessible federal, state, or local scenic or aesthetic resources? Selected as yes. The Hudson River Lighthouse in Omaha.
That should actually say Hudson/Athens Lighthouse. No river. Yeah, there we go.
Lighthouse, Olana is identified. The WIC was a comment.
That
but I don't know, is that a?
It's official.
It is.
It's official.
It is an official scenic and aesthetic.
But I thought the WIC was is that scenic or is that a historic site?
Yeah, this is asking specifically scenic and aesthetic resources that are officially designated.
Oh, so would that be the Olana Viewshed rather than Olana Historic Site? I think because that is, yeah, that would be the Olana Viewshed, which is definitely. So the WIC maybe doesn't belong here, and maybe Olana and Bronson House don't belong here, but they belong somewhere.
Well, but you,
And the walkway across the Hudson on.
We have, right, if you look at the bottom of the page, he already has.
The WIC, yeah, the WIC on for the, state or national listed or eligible historic sites. The walkway, oh, John, were you mentioned? Oh, sorry.
The walkway over the Hudson on the Rip Van Winkle Bridge.
Yeah. Nature basis for designation. So scenic sites is what's identified. And we'll add state park and scenic trail that connects Catskill with Olana.
Yeah.
Is that in a designation there?
Sure.
Yep.
Distance between the project and resource.
I'm sorry. This is going so fast and I'm trying to look at my notes. Where's I? Identify resource. Hudson Athens Lighthouse. I have here WIC equals stockpile height in my notes. So the WIC would be a stockpile. The view of the WIC would be the stockpile height would. I'm so tired, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm just looking at some notes that I don't see having made it to the thing.
So we did have the WIC identified here. That's what we were just discussing. The WIC is included as a.
I know, but this is for question H.
Okay.
So again, we don't have to put it, but I have the WIC because of the stockpile height on item I. I know we're also tired. I have some other things that I have written down here that that haven't made it to the thing, but I'll just call you Ryan.
If you want to call me, if you want to, if you have, I don't know what format your notes are in, you know, if those are able to be.
It's in my handwriting, so it's okay. I'll go over the, how quickly will we be able to look at this?
I can send this out to everybody. Well, I will send this out after we go to the meeting.
Okay, all right. I'll just
after-
go over it by myself where I can take my time and then just, you know, send everybody some notes. Okay.
Okay. And the last question is the project site located within a designated river corridor under Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers Program? And the answer to that is no. So the Wild Scenic Recreational Rivers are more, you know, and more less developed areas.
Ryan,
and
in our little red box there where it says add and it says Railroad Steel Spring Foundry, shouldn't we be including Olana, Thomas Cole? These are other, if the question is within
So
5
this-
miles.
No, so this question is if the project site contains or is substantially contiguous to,
Right.
for items.
Okay, but where was the
And
one that
then
was
item-
within 5 miles?
Each is the 5 miles to an officially designated and publicly accessible scenic or aesthetic resource.
And it isn't Olana, we have the Olana view shed, but isn't Olana itself within 5 miles?
Yeah, I'm wondering what the definition of an aesthetic resource is, because Cole House, Plum Bronson House, these are all, I just don't know where they belong, but they're all within 5 miles.
There are also several parks along the river on the west bank between Cats.
There are historic districts, there's within 5 miles, there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, Village of Athens.
Village of Athens.
Yeah, I mean, you know, especially because 32517 F1 requires us to look at views from the river.
From, yeah.
Right.
Let's just add them,
Including
guys.
across the river.
Let's just add them, and if they're wrong, we can take them out. Let's add them while they're on everybody's minds.
Okay, so Cedar Grove,
While you're adding, the workbook says that, it gives examples, scenic byways. So something like the National Scenic Byways, Parkways, North Country Touring Routes. So there's links to scenic byways, but I don't think that's an issue here. There's scenic areas of statewide significance, or the SAS. There are a few in the Hudson River Valley region and one in Columbia. So we will check that map to see if it's within the SAS. And then scenic rivers and scenic trails.
And be sure to add Olana and the Bronson House to
Yep, so
in the Hudson River.
the Hudson River.
What about Greenport Conservancy?
Is that within 5 miles?
I'm not sure. Is that within 5 miles?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay.
Seems to me it might be.
You want me to write these down, Ryan? You don't have any space left.
please do.
Okay, so do it with me,
I
guys.
will provide, it would be great, you know, if there's any things that come to mind, you know, we can add those. And like I said, I mean, there's, you know, so I know there's in county that they have a local scenic byway, scenic roads program. And so there's a lot of different levels. Victoria was just going through some state and national designations like byways, overlooks, passes. But, you know, it doesn't hurt to include it here. And, you know, it's all part of what you're reviewing under seeker for this
So
project.
here, so you got Bronson House in there,
Laura, please put in the Empire State Trail.
Empire State Trail. I think I've got, the city of Athens. Do you really want me to put that?
Yes.
That's good. City
But
of,
it's the Village of Athens, the Village of Athens.
sorry. That's
Very
Just-
historic.
Just south of that, there's Brandau's Point and the Cahotate Preserve.
All right, John, you have to write those down.
I did somewhere, I thought, this I think maybe came up in part 2, if I'm not mistaken. But I'll write it, I'll jot it.
Yeah, I just don't know how to spell that stuff. So, all right, the Hudson River, Empire State Trail, Village of Athens. You got Bronson House in there. You got Olana in there. Anything else, guys, that other than what John just said? Because people were naming stuff, and I
Did you get Greenport Conservation Area?
No, thank you.
What about the Cole House? Is that 5 miles?
Yeah, that's here. Cedar Grove
Oh, okay,
is its official name.
got it.
Oh, you historical nerd, you.
I work for the Preservation League.
I know.
Yeah.
I couldn't resist that, though.
Okay.
And you're welcome to throw it back at me.
Oh, I will. Your day is coming.
I mean, John, you are a subscriber to Pit and Quarry magazine, so I think there's a lot of.
Yeah.
Ryan, can we just, I know that we reached the end and we're all exhausted, but can we just go back all the way to the top? Because I missed something at the very top. I'm really sorry.
All right.
At the very, very top.
Going.
Yeah, okay. Name of action or project. I think that should read A. Colorusso and Son commercial dock operations in the city of Hudson.
Oh, you're very good.
In this, you said?
In the city of Hudson.
Like you're at a dock and we need operations, plural.
Sorry, I missed that, Larry.
Operations, plural.
Operations.
Oh,
Ryan, we have a great.
Want to go? We're at the top. Do you want to go through again? Anything else?
No,
no, stop.
But we have, we
We're
have.
taking another look at this. I think the description of the proposed action, I think we should elaborate a little more on everything that's falling under that. We don't need to do that right now, but.
So, Victoria, is that something with your, with your knowledge of the Melkonian decision and the code, that's something that, perhaps you could draft a paragraph on the description of the proposed action, just so that we have a very clear description of it moving forward?
Yep, I can do
That would be really helpful. Okay. I think we've all bitten off about as much as we can chew here. So I do want to thank you all for your diligence and your thoughtful deliberations here. There's a lot. This is a lot. So we didn't make it through part 2, but what I'm going to do is I'm really going to encourage everybody to go back over your questions that you were responsible for and make sure that the part 2 FIF reflects what you said and all of the research that you did. And I would encourage all of us to look over all of it because we were just picking up historic things that we hadn't listed prior. So I think I'm going to ask everyone to read through the entire thing, but please pay particular attention to the questions that you were responsible for. And if there's parsing of that, Victoria, are we obligated? Can we send notes to Ryan to be included in that, or are we obligated to do that in a public forum?
Individual board members can send notes to Ryan, but we can't have 7 board members discussing whether or not to include it.
Oh, I know that. I was just wondering if this kind of review can happen. Does it have to happen in an open forum on Zoom, or can we send our comments to Ryan to update FIF Part 2?
Everyone can send their individual comments to Ryan.
Okay.
You don't have to copy everyone, and then Ryan can.
So Ryan, when you send us this new rendition of part 1, could you, I know you've already sent it, but could you send us what you have as part 2? You know, that,
Mhm.
again, I know you did it, but could you do it again so I don't have to go through that?
So I'm going to send out 2 emails after the meeting. One will include part 1 that we just went through, part 2 from March meeting, and I'll send a separate email with that the zoning kind of letter we put back in 2017 for the ZBA. So you'll get 2 emails from me this evening. If you have any questions, let me know, and then feel free to part 2, because the part 3 is going to kind of be that explanation of those determinations made in part 2, and then an eventual determination of significance. So as you're going through everything, even if it's a bulleted list or, you know, one long run-on sentence that's a full page, it would be very helpful to, you know, incorporate those to start working on developing part 3, to support that those part 2 determinations. And that I can pull together so that the board, you know, can review it, and then we can review it in public session as one document, as opposed to, you know, typing it and you seeing all my spelling errors.
I think that'll speed things up a bit too. So I'm assuming that we're going to want to review part 2 in a special session like this. So I will get back to all of you with suggested dates for about a month from now, 3 weeks from now, something like that.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for hanging in. We got a lot done. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, thanks.
You know it.
Okay.
Thanks for the call.
Good night.
Good night.
Everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Bye.